So James, Alex, why don't we start off by telling us how did you get in the IT industry? So James, please kick this off for us.
It was totally by accident. I was working for a little company, kind of a subset of Bally Gaming, if anybody knows who they are, writing software for automated fruit machines, and I specialized in automated roulette machines, and it was quite easy. It was only monitoring, receiving data over TCP/IP and writing it to a database. I decided I wanted to change, so I moved into contracting, and the first contract I took was to help a small hospital receive data from a larger nearby hospital. And so I had to write that. It was in VB, and it was in right into a database. But the larger hospital was having problems sending the data to the smaller hospital. So I went to see them to try and find out what the problem was, thinking they were writing it in C or VB or something. And it turned out they were using this product called Rhapsody. And they didn't have any experience with it. So we talked to them and said, can I have a look and give you a hand? And because I knew how TCP/IP worked, I said, well, you've obviously got this setting wrong and this setting wrong, change it really quickly. Rhapsody 2.3, very easy. And it just worked like that. And they said, wow, you've got Rhapsody experience. And I said, no, it's just really easy. But they didn't have any experience with moving data the way that they needed to move it. So they then said, okay, do you mind, like, what you're doing after the contract that you've got now with that, the smaller hospital? And I said, I'm not really doing anything after that. And they said, do you want to come work for us for a couple of months to help them do a little bit more in Rhapsody? I did. I stayed with them for 18 months, and we rewrote the entire integration side of things with Rhapsody. That was really good. At the end of that contract, I then moved and took on another contract in integration at a different hospital, but it was with eGate and Monk. And I lasted 3 weeks, a month. The integration engine was terrible. I couldn't get on with it. I didn't understand it. It was complicated. And because I'd seen Rhapsody, I said, no, I can't deal with this software. Funnily enough, that company actually, when I came to work for Rhapsody, they did actually switch from eGate and Monk to Rhapsody. But luckily for me, what happened after that was I got hired by another hospital contracting, working myself in Rhapsody, and I helped them do a huge migration again. And at the end of that, I think that Rhapsody were kind of annoyed with me taking all their billable work from them. So they decided to hire me so I could work for Rhapsody, doing Rhapsody work all over EMEA. So yeah, that's pretty much how I fell into it.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. 12 years later, here I am still.
Alex, how about you? How did you get into the IT industry?
Well, I got into the IT industry because I had a bachelor's of science in computer science, but when the tech bubble burst, I couldn't find a job, and I was looking around, and I finally got a support job at an integration company, but it was not for healthcare. It was for financial institutions, banks, and their ATMs, et cetera, et cetera. So I was there for about 2 or 3 years before they got bought out by a competitor. And as I was waiting around to figure out my fate, some of my ex-coworkers had already moved on to a company called NeoTool. And they suggested I walk up 2 flights of stairs in the same building and ask for an interview. And I knew a lot about interfacing, but I knew nothing about healthcare, and they were more than willing to teach me and help me learn the workflow of what it's like to be doing healthcare data instead of financial data. And I've been here from NeoTool to Corepoint Health to Lineate.
Awesome. So I think you both alluded to how long you've been with the company, but if you could maybe describe your role, your title, and explain what you both do in that role. So Alex, why don't you continue on with that?
Yeah, sure. I joined the company in August of 2006, so it's been 14 years. I worked my way from support to training, which I still do to a point, and up to professional services. And I'm still in professional services right now. So my title is team lead of professional services in North America. And so primarily what I do is we assist customers in any way possible, whether it be remote or on-site, We help train them, we teach them how to use the product, and we help them with their first few interfaces, get them running, do their entire interface, all their interfaces if they need to, or convert from a previous engine. So those are just a couple of things that we do.
Great. James, how about you? How long you been with the organization, and describe your role for us and title?
I mean, I'd like to say same again, pretty much. Unfortunately, Alex beats me by 2 years. So I only started in 2008, July 2008. But yeah, I do very much a similar thing that he does. So my official title is Senior Implementation Consultant, specializing in Rhapsody. And I help new customers or potential customers understand how Rhapsody can help them, as well as helping current customers get the most out of their engine. I do training, very similar to Alex does. Yeah, and just basically helping the product, either helping the customer with learning how to use Rhapsody and write it themselves, or writing it for them. Ditto, I guess, is the phrase.
So I'm going to make a bold claim that since you've both been with us for more than a decade, that you don't hate your jobs. So instead, why don't you tell us, what do you like most about your role? Alex, kick us off.
Yeah, so what I appreciate most about my role, and I've talked to James about this several times, is this idea of when we talk to customers and they have a certain idea of what they want out of the product or what they need out of this project, we accomplish that, and we do it in record time, easier than they thought it would be. And then we add on to it. And so instead of just passing messages from one place to the other, we give them the idea that, well, we can put this through a database and we can show you logs of what's happening, or we can show you some notifications if something goes wrong. And there's a light bulb moment that comes on. The light bulb comes on and they realize, wait, so I can do more than just pass messages through, and that's what I wanted, but this can make my life significantly easier. I don't have to go checking for something. It will come to me. And so this light bulb moment, whether it be doing things that are just a little bit outside of the project, just so they know and understand that the engine can do so much more, that gives them that gives them a really happy feeling that they can do and accomplish so much more, and that makes us pretty happy too.
How about you, James?
Very similar vein, really. The customers come to you with a certain problem, and they want you to build a certain functionality, and we can do that. That's not a problem whatsoever. When you start adding new business logic and you start giving value added resources, they realize that it goes from being just a workhorse to something that can innovate and help them move forward with certain things. We have certain triggers, so lots of different things, from triggering alerts if a cancer patient's come into A&E to make sure that their specialist is made aware and they can bring the drugs onto the ward, and then they'll spend less time in hospital. There's hundreds and hundreds of different things that we can do that the customer may not have thought of. And as I say, they go from thinking of it as a workhorse, as something that just sits in the background and does donkey work, to something that's actually quite clever, and you can add business rules and business logic and help the business in the long term.
Excellent. So you both discussed what you like about your roles and working with customers. I'm curious now what your favorite part of the engine is, and if you have a story behind that feeling. James, how about you?
With Rhapsody, I think because I came from being a customer, obviously I found it very intuitive. That's one of the things that I really, really like about the engine. It's so easy to teach someone, even non-programmers. It's so easy to teach someone, like moving something from A to B and using the different functionality within Rhapsody to do things easily. I think that's the thing that I really like. It's intuitive, and it's quite easy for people to pick up, to do simple things, and then it's not so simple and restricted that people who really want to dig into it can do, and do more complicated things the more and more they get into it. It's a bit cheesy, but I do love to see customers creating something new, and yeah, it is the smile on their faces when they realize how the different things they can do. It sounds so cheesy, but that's the way it is.
Sure. So Alex, how about you? Favorite part of the engine, and then is there a story behind how that came to be?
Yeah, so I have two favorite parts, and one I've talked to James in a little bit that we have similar pieces and parts of our engine that allow us to do a significant amount of testing before we turn the engine and the interfaces on, and that is super duper helpful because we realize that when we create our logic and we turn it on, we're just guessing. Is it right? Did it work the way that we wanted it to work? But within our engines, we have the ability to load test messages, run a bunch of them through, look at the output, compare it, figure out like, this is exactly what I wanted it to do, or no, this wasn't. Let me make a change before I turn this whole thing on and open the fire hose, right? So it gives us a lot of confidence that when during go live time and it's in the middle of the night when they turn on their EMR for the first time, or they turn on this interface for the first time, that it's going to work. It's going to work the way that we planned it to because we've tested it properly. And there's so many little testing tools to make sure that we know what we're doing all along the way. And the second one is the undo button. That's my favorite, just because I wish I had it on my life sometimes. I've gone down rabbit holes on logic to say, maybe if I do this, and maybe if I do this, and 10 steps later, I realized, no, all of it was wrong. And I could hit the undo button 10 times and get back to the right path as soon as possible. So I appreciate that in computing in general, but especially within our engine, when I go down the wrong path, I get that undo button.
James, do you feel Alex is being unfair there by naming 2 favorites and you only named 1? Do you want the forum to provide your second favorite tool?
Well, it's very similar to what he's been saying. We have like a version control thing within Rhapsody where we can roll back. So it's kind of like an undo button. And then, as he said as well, testing, that's something that that has been added to Rhapsody in the last couple of iterations, and it's made a huge improvement.
So I'm going to hazard a guess that the tools that you guys both just mentioned will be a part of this next question, which is, I'd like to know about the biggest project you've ever worked on, what made it so huge, what were the most tedious, most exciting, most frustrating, most rewarding aspects of that. So James, could you kick us off on that topic?
I've been involved in quite a few big projects, helping out on the not on the sidelines, but kind of piecemealing work as and when, because we all help and divvy together when there's large projects and work is needed doing. But the biggest single project that I've kind of taken ownership, we had a customer come to us who wanted to do a migration. They were migrating from eGate into to Rhapsody, or they wanted to migrate to a new setup because the engine was being sunset. And they came to us originally and they said, we've got a very tight timeline. We've got 70 interfaces. It's complicated because there's lots of different systems. So there's XML, there's plain text, there's HL7. There's lots of order comms as well as standard ADTs. Can you do it? And we spent a couple of weeks helping them, working out exactly how long it was going to take. And we said that you've got an 18-month deadline. We think we can do it in the 18 months. As long as we move pretty quickly, we can get it done. Unfortunately, the technical guys, their hands were tied by the financial purse strings, and I think it was 3 months later they came back to us and said, we've got the money, can you still do the work? And we said, well, it's going to be tight now. But we can do it. Yeah, we can do it. We can bring, as I said, we can bring on more developers and help get the timeline down. Another month went by, and we started on the project. And yeah, it was a very short time for us to do it, but we divvied up. I was kind of the team lead on it, which was quite exciting as well. And we worked really well with the customer, and we were training the customer while we were doing the work so they could hit the ground running. And what actually happened was, towards the end, the customer was actually helping us do the configuration as well as us doing it. So they got to a point so quickly where they actually understood how it worked. They were using our integrations as an example, so they could help and build the workforce and cut their costs and cut their time down. And we made it on time, and it was brilliant. My first ever massive project that I was kind of leading up, and it went really well. So that was a big one for me.
And you know, it was kind of you witnessing the evolution of your use of Rhapsody, because that's how you got started using the product.
Exactly, yeah. So I was originally a customer, and it's nice to try and you rather than the customer going, oh, that is something that sits in the corner and does the work, you get them involved and they realize how interesting it is. This particular customer, they were actually very, very good and technical. They'd written all this stuff in a very hard to understand engine, and they were relieved when they moved to Rhapsody because they realized how much more powerful it was with lots of different functionality and how much easier it was to use. So yeah, they're still a big customer of ours, and a lot of the team there are good friends of mine now. So
awesome. Alex, biggest project that you've worked on? What made it great, difficult, rewarding?
Yeah, so the largest project I worked on was, oh man, back in 2008. They reeled me into this nice project because I realized that they were taking me to Seattle, and it was the best part of the year to be in Seattle. And little did I know that the rest of the year it's nice and dreary the whole time. But they had me come out about 1 week out of every month for about a year or so. And they helped me convert 2 hospitals, just like James, from eGate to Corepoint. And so what would happen is we would teach them a little bit, we would train them, and then we would do interfaces alongside of them. We would do our own, we would do them. They would look and make sure that we had the logic correct, just like in their previous engine. And when that was done, it was we were all happy about it. But their larger organization that spanned about several states over there basically said, you know what, we're going to make an overall decision on what engine that you can use for the whole entire organization. So whatever it was that you had before, I'm sorry, we're going to go with Oracle Fusion, whatever that is. It's not a healthcare interface engine. It is just an engine in general, and you'd have to figure out the parsing yourself. And they said, thank you for all your help, but in about a year or so, we're going to, jump off of Corepoint. And we were sad about that. That was a little frustrating that we worked a couple of years on that, and it had to go away so quickly. And so I went on vacation, went to San Diego, watched a friend get married, and in the middle of my vacation, Sonal, my boss at that time, gave me a call, said, this customer needs our help right now because they're going live on Epic in about a week or 2 in terms of their first phase of testing. And they have nothing done in terms of interfaces. They could not get Oracle Fusion working. They need us there. Can you fly straight there instead of coming home? And I asked how the weather is in Texas, and she said it's about 100+ degrees. And I realized, you know what, I'm not going to go back. I'm going to go straight to Portland, help them out. And I met our CTO there. We trained up their team because their team is much larger than the 2 small hospitals we first converted, but it's a team for the whole entire organization. So they had to learn how to get Corepoint up and running. We helped them out with that. Then the next week, we helped create several of their first interfaces and get them live on all of their interfaces for their first phase of testing with Epic. And they were so impressed that that is what their engine is now. And after a year or 2 more of training them, teaching them, doing more of their conversion interfaces, they started teaching their own teams. They started creating their own interfaces. They didn't need us at the go lives anymore. And they are by far our largest customer right now, and it's really nice to see that they are doing everything on their own. And it's nice that I got to be a part of that at the very beginning, and they are doing things that are much more complicated than what I first did over there, and I'm pretty proud to see them do those things.
So were you in your rental tuxedo at the hospital building those interfaces in a hurry?
It was funny. I said, well, all I have with me is a suit and shorts and t-shirts because I'm going out to the beach in California. And they said, buy clothes. We'll pay for work clothes. And so you guys paid for work clothes for me, and I jumped aboard because I didn't have any of that packed.
Awesome. So you mentioned Epic in that story. I'd like to shift to that topic. So let's talk about connecting to EMR, EHR, HIS. How do you start with a customer when approaching a massive system migration like that? So James, can you kick us off on that topic?
Obviously, we need specifications and an idea of what's going to link to what and the different data types and that kind of thing. But for me, it's sample messages. Data's king. If you don't have the data, then you can't really start. Documentation and specification of messages from a supplier are always good, but it's very rare that the specification matches the actual messages that come in from the system, because it's always slightly tweaked for the particular site, or a certain flavor is added, or there is a certain thing that they have to change for some reason on site. So for me, it's always data, and there's lots of different things within Rhapsody that allow you to take that data and automatically generate specifications and things that Rhapsody actually uses. And so Rhapsody helps you do the work if you have the sample messages. So yeah, for me, data is king. Give me the data and I can work with it. Specifications are good, but I trust the data.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I totally agree with James in terms of specifications. There are times when they'll set up specifications, and that's good and great. And if they have to change them, they won't update them, or they'll forget to update them. And what's actually coming out of the source system is really important to us. It doesn't really matter what the specifications say. And so I wouldn't say that they're never right, but in this case, I probably would say that the specifications are never right. And so, yeah, Corepoint has the ability to take in those specifications, create our derivatives so that we can properly parse any HL7 message that comes out of a source system, so we can properly grab that data and put it anywhere that we need to for any downstream system. So that data is really important. And I would say specifically real data or production data is even better, especially if you're doing a conversion and you have that available, because a sample message from your spec at the very bottom of your spec that has like half the fields populated, that's not really that, helpful to me, and especially if it's just one message. But if there are more and more pieces of real data that we can sample, that's going to make our testing as bulletproof as possible.
There are so many situations where you go back to the supplier and say, the specification here, it says one thing, and your messages, they're not quite matching. Oh yes, well, you haven't got the latest version of the specification, and they run away and change the specification to match their messages and then send it to you, and you realize that they edited it a couple of minutes before they sent you the new one. So yeah, it's always a good one.
But also at the same time, it's not even that. Sometimes, James, they won't even, they'll say, oh yeah, sorry, well, that's what's coming out of the system, so deal with it. And that's what the engine's for. We have the ability to deal with it, even if the specifications say it's not what it's supposed to be. So
we integrate no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, so you both say data is king, and it seems like you both experienced that. On the same note then, what are the trickiest aspects of EMR migrations? I feel like you might have just alluded to that, but what are the pitfalls and the tricky things to be aware of?
I would say data quality as well is the data that's actually stored in the EMRs, moving them from the old version to the new version, finding duplicates, that kind of thing. We can help with that, but it's a lot of the time it's actual problems with the data itself. You can come in and find that there are issues with it, or you can find that the data was or the alterations were being done wrongly before, so the wrong data was being put in a particular place, so you'll be asked to come in and mirror exactly what was being done before, and then you start to do that and you realize that the old way was wrong, and you have to say, well, we shouldn't really be mirroring something that's wrong, shall we change it? So I would say data quality really is the biggest issue.
I'd have to agree with James, also paired with your timeline, because I realized that there were several projects where they said, start working on the interfaces now. It's like, okay, well, we have everything listening. Can you send us data? We're not ready for that quite yet. We have to kind of set up a couple things. Well, the interfaces are ready whenever you want to send the data, and months pass, and we're 3 months till go live, and they still haven't given us the data, and we're like, oh no, this is really, really tight. I mean, we can do it, but this is going to be a little stressful. And they'll finally get us the data, and hopefully it is of good quality at that time. But it does take them a while to make sure that everything is correct before they send it to the interface. And a lot of times when we get to the interface, it's not the interface issue, but it's a data quality issue of, hey, you need to change this and that, because no matter what the engine does, we can't make up data. So if it's missing, you got to give it to us in some way. So the data quality paired with a tight timeline of, hey, when are you going to actually give us that data is can be a little frustrating and challenging.
So we've discussed your favorite tools within the engines, your most daunting projects, but I'd like to ask each of you if there's a project from your tenure that you're most proud of. James, do you have something in mind?
I mean, other than the one that I mentioned with the tight time frame that I was leading on, it's always the value added ones. So there's a couple of projects where, for example, if a result comes back to say that a patient has a positive result for C. diff or MRSA back in the day, or even any of the most recent airborne viruses, then what we can do is we can trigger emails or text messages, or in some cases even phone calls to the infection control team, and they can go and make sure that the patient is correctly controlled and moved away from any patient to keep infections down. Again, the thing that I mentioned before about cancer patients, so if a cancer patient is admitted to A&E, then their specialist can be informed to make sure they get the drugs that they need ASAP, because a break in drugs can cause a longer stay. Less stay on the site in the UK anyway is better for the general public at large, because it's the public health service. So that's a couple of things that are really good. It's adding value to systems that people wouldn't think about. And yeah, some of our customers have won awards for that kind of thing.
Excellent. Alex, how about you?
I have a couple of proud moments, and I think one of what really helps is that the engine makes it really easy for for me in terms of some of the projects that I've come into have been, we're migrating from one EMR to another, and we have one engine guy, and then he left, and so his backup is doing everything. He doesn't know what he's doing, so we need your help, Alex. And come in, I try to help them out, and they have a week before their go live, and there's only so much we can do, and he's stressing out, and we come in and we're like, we're going to do our best. They turn it on. Of course, the testing did not happen, so everything's going wrong. But with our engine, we have the ability to say, okay, well, if it was wrong, where is it wrong? We can find the logs, we can find where it went wrong. Do you want us to fix it? How would you like to fix it? There, it's fixed. Oh, you want us to send messages from the last 2 days that were broken to fix them? We can do it right now, and then we're done. And so that happened over and over and over and over that weekend, where things were wrong. We could find it, we could fix it, we can fix anything that happened beforehand and try again. And that happened so many times over that weekend. And it's not that everything went right, it's because but we had the tools to fix things and fix things quickly. And mitigate them before the weekend was up, and patients would start crawling in to the ER on Monday. And so it was a proud moment, because I knew I had all the tools to help them out in their greatest time of need, which is that weekend, all weekend, right? And so that made me proud. And I also realized, not just him, but a couple of my other projects, I made their lives easier. And this it's great that and I really appreciate when we do things that help the providers and provide the patient and the patients. But James and I, we get to know the engine team, and they're people that we talk to, we joke around, we become friends with, and it's great to see that the engine and the work that we do improves and enhances their lives. Sometimes it means that with alerts set and with the right logic in place, that if we had to find something, it's easy to find. If there's something wrong, that it comes to them, or it goes out to the person that needs to know about it. And it means that they can do maybe regular 40 hours or less a week, as opposed to 50, 60, 70 hours a week, trying to find something and see what's going on and stress out over it. And so I've seen people's lives become easier, and they're my friends, and it's nice to know that they don't have to worry about it as much. And so those are some proud moments for me.
More beer drinking time.
Oh yeah.
It's the important stuff. So this next question, I think, hits on that theme, right? Because you gentlemen have not only seen the evolution of this industry, but also the evolution of the products that you've been using for well over a decade each. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about the different versions of each product over the years. Is there a particular version that made a huge jump? Why? Was there a release that made a huge impact from a customer perspective? So I'd love to know if there's that particular version that made that real jump in your opinions. James, is there anything that jumps to you?
The first time I really used Rhapsody was back in like 2.2 and 2.3, and it was good, but there were issues with it. It was a little bit flaky in a few places, and then they released 2.4, and that was great. So 2.4 became the standard and that everybody jumped to. Then there was a massive shift. Rhapsody was storing data in the database, in like a SQL database or Oracle database, or in some cases in Access as well. But then I know, long time ago. But then we moved to 3, where we wrote our own storage location. It was written specifically for Rhapsody, and that's what it still runs on today. But that kind of brought in its own gremlins, and there were some issues. The front end changed slightly, and the customers weren't huge fans, and we had some gremlins. And then we moved from 3 to 4, and that was quite a big jump, and things got a lot better and tended to go back towards the way that the front end and everything worked in the version everybody loved, which is 2.4, with the underlying custom storage setup that Rhapsody produced. But obviously now everybody wants the latest and greatest, and it sounds sad to say, but 6.5 that we're on now, 6.5.1, is very stable, very fast. It's great, and everybody wants to move to it because it's got a combination of optimization over the years, new technology, the latest JVM upgrades, and it's the version everybody wants now. So it's very good that I can say the latest version of Rhapsody is the greatest version of Rhapsody.
Yeah. But you love having that 2.4 version in the garage, like an old Rolls Royce.
I still have a VM. I still have I can't remember. I think I'm running XP or something, and it's got 2.4 on. Definitely. I need to dig that out. It does that often. Yeah. I'm not sure about Rolls Royce. It was good, but compared to now, maybe an old school Rolls Royce. Yeah, maybe.
Fair enough. Alex, how about you? How's the engine evolved over the years, and is there a flagship release that made a huge impact in your view?
Well, there were probably several. When I came in, all of the configuration GUIs were all separate. If you wanted to create derivatives and different versions of HL7, you'd have to go into one place. If you wanted to create logic, you'd go to another place. If you wanted to create connections, you go into another place. And so there was a unification in version 3 where you could do all of your configuration in one place and all the monitoring in another. And that's just the 2 places that we go to. And up to now, we're still saying, if you want to find how the engine's doing, go look in monitoring. If you want to make some changes, you go to configuration. Those are the only 2. You don't have to hunt and peck for the right window, right? Then after version 5.0, we added a SQL Server as the back end, and we utilized the power of that for a lot of different things, whether it be for A2 or for a disaster recovery. And so there was a significant leap from 5.0 and beyond 5.0 specifically. And at that point, we had SQL Server in the back end, and our performance probably went up through the roof compared to what it was before. And I think I would say the same for as James, that the latest version of Corepoint is the best version of Corepoint and has the latest features. And one of the things that we are hearing from support and all the statistics they keep is that there have been the fewest bugs in 7.3, and we've had the fewest calls about what's going on in 7.3. And so this is it speaks to how bulletproof it is and how much better it's gotten over the years and things like that. So it's nice that we can crank out new releases and we don't break things in the process. And so 7.3, the latest, greatest.
Awesome. Well, that's good news. The latest and greatest of both is the latest and greatest.
Mm-hmm.
So how has your use, the way you build interfaces, evolved over the years? James, what do you think?
I think, as I mentioned before, I've become slightly less trusting of specifications from suppliers. But I think it's more to do with the way that Rhapsody's evolved to the use. So back in the day, there was no real way to test messages without pushing them through the engine, like using a directory and pushing the data in that way and polling them. And even then, you didn't really know exactly what was going on in the engine. So it's kind of like a black box test. With the newer versions now, what you can do is you can actually individually test each single part as it goes through. You can add test suites to it. You can see whether or not it passed the test. So if you make alterations moving from one engine to another for migration or upgrading, you can do a test first using the stored test messages in the test suite to see if the whole engine has had any changes. That was a huge game changer, being able to actually test things in the engine while you're looking at it. That was huge. But yeah, the other huge leap forward was, I think it was in version 4, where in real time you could go and see every single message going through every single point. So every single change, everything, every time that Rhapsody did any kind of functionality to the document, to the message, or anywhere it changed it, or it directed it to a different place or put any particular rule on, you can see a before and after. So you can see on one side what it came in as, and on the other side what it went out as. And you can see the alterations side by side. Huge leap forward for debugging if there were issues, and just generally being able to follow the message and see exactly what's happening to it as it goes through the engine. It's transparent and you can see everything in one go. Game changer. That was huge.
How about you, Alex? How have you evolved or changed in the way that you build interfaces over the years?
Yeah, 2 ways. Well, I think the engine has evolved in one aspect, similar to James, in that when we start working on a lot of different interfaces, and we realize having to do this over and over and over again, we have the ability to talk to engineering and development and say, is there an easier way to do this? Or I'm trying to calculate a date and it takes me 15, 20, 50 lines of logic to make this happen. Well, yeah, we can just make this a little tab over here. And if you want to add a day or an hour or a second, why don't we make that easily available if that's something you constantly do and see that customers are constantly doing. And so the engine has evolved to make things easier and easier and easier, and things that I would have had to take hours or days to try to make up is a drop down or a checkbox somewhere. And it's amazing that the developers are listening to what are pain points and making them really, really easy, or not pain points at all anymore. The other way that I've seen evolve is when I first came on, all it was HL7 version 2. It was here's an HL7 message, pass on another HL7 message. Here's another one, pass it on. It might be orders, it might be results, it might be ADTs, but they're all similar. And as I've been growing, I've been looking at all the other aspects of the engine to be able to receive XML, to be able to receive a JSON, to be able to receive a lot of different kinds of formats, whether it be X12, and be able to take those, parse them the same way that I would for HL7 and make changes. I realized there are other data workflows that are not just clinical workflows that are going through the engine. And so I've seen a lot of different kinds of formats. And I think in healthcare, HL7 2.0 is the bread and butter, and that's what the majority of my interfaces will look like. But web services is coming up, and there's a lot of other interfaces that will be using web services instead of normal TCP/IP HL7. And I've gotten to witness how to do that. I've gotten to figure out how to create web pages and have them served up by Corepoint. It's amazing all the other things that the engine can do on top of just the basic HL7.
So our platforms are used across the healthcare ecosystem, right? Can you provide some color and context to any differences in the way that hospitals, radiology labs, clinics, and vendors make the most out of having an engine? James, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I guess one of the major things that's quite funny or interesting with the way that Rhapsody works with when we're working with vendors is it speeds up the integration process so much that the vendors see the added benefit of using Rhapsody, because a lot of the time they'll have a hard time interfacing to a site if they're linking to something or trying to embed their new system on site. Some of the times they have problems, and many suppliers have been so impressed with the way that Rhapsody works. They've taken the Rhapsody specifications, so the way that Rhapsody actually details the different use of the messages that the supplier provides. They've taken those specifications and provided them to other customers and said, here, we can use Rhapsody, and they've actually used it as a selling point. Say, we can use Rhapsody. Here is our specification from Rhapsody. You can drop this in and it'll help you move forward. And also in some other cases, I've got quite a few partners now that are actually embedding parts of Rhapsody within their product. So it makes it much easier for them to integrate themselves, and they use it as a massive selling point. Say, we are, not only are we Rhapsody compliant, which everybody is really, because Rhapsody can deal with anything, but also we have Rhapsody embedded, so we can alter, the supplier saying this, we can alter what we receive, or we can alter what we send you easily, because we use the software within, embed Rhapsody, parts of Rhapsody within their software to do that.
Alex, what have you seen?
Yeah, I've seen similar instances in where we are able to use our engine in a variety of different places where they have a lot of systems, which usually there's one EMR, but in some instances there's 2 or 3 in the process, right? And they're trying to consolidate them. And when they realize, okay, well, one system carries the registration information, one carries all of the order information. They have different sources of truth. And one example is the latest project I've done in terms of COVID is that they're taking a lot of time calling up people about their results. And yeah, a lot of them are negative, and so, but they still have to give them a call and say, okay, maybe I have to leave a 2-minute message saying that you're negative and this is what you need to do. I got to call someone else. I got to call someone else. This is on a scale that's they've never had to deal with before. And so when one of their sources of truth has the email address and the other one has the actual registration and the other one has the results, we have the ability to combine all those pieces of information and say, okay, this person has this email address and they have a negative result. Why don't we email them to go look onto the website, because the website will have all the information, instead of having our all of our nurses be stuck on the phone trying to tell them that, yes, they are okay, yes, you're okay, yes, you're okay. And of course, maybe the positives, you do need to take the time to tell them what's going on. But if an overwhelming amount of people are negative, then you're going to save a significant amount of time for all of the healthcare providers that are doing that. And so I've seen Corepoint take different pieces of different interfaces, put them in a database, take a look, and create something that is truly helpful for the public, for the and for the hospital as well. And so it's really cool and really neat how I've seen that is definitely not an original use case of the engine of how they wanted their interfaces to work, but we have access to all that data, and we could utilize that for something really good.
It speaks to the flexibility, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm curious, from both your perspectives, what excites you about the future of this industry and the future of our products? What challenges do you see, and what impact do you think we can have? So that's 4 big questions wrapped up into one. James, what strikes you?
Well, I suppose that the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is expanding out into different areas, so like non-health industries, because I think what happened with Rhapsody is we picked one of the hardest things to integrate, because HL7 is so complicated, the way it works, and the fact that no specification is sent with it. It's intrinsic to the standard, and Rhapsody got so good now that it's got to a point where I believe it's better than any other industry standard interface. So I don't know, insurance or finance, that kind of thing. I just can't see how another engine can be as good as Rhapsody when it comes to doing that kind of interfacing. So I think it'd be cool to move into different industries. But within the healthcare industry, obviously, we're going to talk about it at some point today, is web services and fire. So that is already a big thing.
And James, I know you're across the pond, so you don't have some of the government standards and things that are put onto you by the US, but very recently they put out a couple of standards requiring insurance companies to be able to use certain kinds of interfaces. And those are things that Corepoint and Rhapsody are both readily and available to use those standards, whether it be fire standards, X12 standards that they're currently using. We have those in our tool chest, and so we have the ability to do those things. And so we are, and I believe sales is already looking into a lot of people who are, they're healthcare related because they're health insurance related, right? And there are other companies that are coming to us and saying, okay, well, yeah, we could integrate this by ourselves, but that would take a long time, and you guys already have this. Can we put you in the cloud, and can we send this information to you? Can you transform it to a format that we already understand, or can you transform it into the format that that the government has mandated onto us that needs to be in place by next year? So I think there are a lot of other industries that are going to come into our field of view because of the government mandated standards that they put in place. And so I realize that is coming to us, and we're going to definitely be expanding into some of those areas.
And that's why we're 1 and 2 class.
Yeah,
I believe. I mean, that's why we are 1 and 2 in the class. So you mentioned the cloud as well. That's obviously another big thing that everybody's talking about, moving into the cloud. And I'm sure that Corepoint could do that, been able to do that for a while, and that's something that Rhapsody we're doing at the moment now as well. So it's actually cheaper long term when you think about it. You don't have to have the hardware move into the cloud. You don't have to support it. You don't have to pay their staff to support it either. And they can specialize in other things instead that are within the hospital, rather than having to specialize in the hardware support. But you are, Corepoint's definitely in the cloud.
Yeah, and so I think there's different versions of what we consider to be in the cloud. There's this idea of you have a computer and it's available anywhere on the internet, and then you install Corepoint on it, or you install Rhapsody. Look, it's in the cloud, right? And that's what a lot of versions of Corepoint and Rhapsody in the cloud in Azure or AWS currently is. And in the future, in our combined future, there will be a product that we're looking for that combines all of the best things about Rhapsody and best things about Corepoint and into a cloud-based solution that is natively cloud, that is not using SQL backend or whatever, but is using the Azure SQL backend and things like that. It's optimizing things that only cloud-based solutions could do. Right now, we have virtual machines in the cloud, and both products are installed there, and it works, but there will be a native cloud version that's the best of both worlds. And we'll get there eventually, but that's our path to combining the best of both worlds.
It's a little bit tighter over here because most of our customers are NHS based, and in order to link to each other and send data from place to place, there's a thing called the HSCN, which is a virtual network VPN for the country NHS, and it's quite hard to get on there, and it's quite hard to get the cloud working correctly with that. And we've got a couple of customers now that are on there, and we also have. This week, I can't believe you mentioned it. This week, I've actually started using only logging just for out of interest to an Azure database and an Azure SQL database. So we're on I'm not going to say bleeding edge. We're on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
On that note, James, you've been spending quite a bit of time working with customers in NHS around digitizing and fire. Did you want to mention anything about that in relation to what you and Alex have just been talking about?
It's all we get asked about at the moment within the NHS. What happened was NHS Digital, which is you can guess what the NHS Digital is. The digital section of the NHS required all trusts to be able to spit out a fire message. Just so happens to be an electronic discharge summary. And nobody knows what fire is. Nobody knows how to use it. Everybody's asking about it, and nobody knows how to do it. So I've been working with our customers and also with our co-creation lab that is something within Lineate, who they work to try and solve customers' problems from a high up level and also down to a nano level as well. And this was one of the things they picked up on, creating electronic discharges for the NHS. It's been pretty crazy, but I've spent like the last 18 months going through it and trying to help our customers adhere to this particular demand. And it's really interesting because it's hard work, but we're getting very close. And it turns out that a lot of the times the data isn't available within the trust to actually adhere to this in the first place anywhere. So they're having to do a lot of work and do data mining and find the information. But yeah, fire is on the lips of everybody. Web services and fire. Everybody wants to know about it. Nobody really even knows what fire stands for when you first start talking to them, or even how to spell it. So it's interesting talking to customers, explaining that we are on the way there, and we're slowly getting a band of trust together who are moving forward and getting it done. But that's the huge thing in region at the moment. Fire, fire, fire. Everything's on fire.
It's on fire.
I get the same, James, in terms of there have been more and more customers saying, the fear, can you tell me, it's pronounced fire, it's okay. And, well, we're supposed to do this. I'm like, oh, so what interface do you need to connect? And like, well, we're not really sure yet, but can you do it?
No, we just want fur. Can you tell me how to do fur? I love fur. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yes, I had it last night. It was amazing. No, so, but they ask, but they don't have a real use case yet, right? And so there are a handful of customers that have actually used fire in production, but most of them are asking because they're told from higher ups that this is what they need, and they don't even know which interface to use it for and why they need to use it. But the good news is, at least in the core product, we have the fire standards in place for in XML and in JSON, and the final version came out in 7.3. So the one that they won't change constantly until they get it right. So the final version that is truly backwards compatible is in 7.3. And so we're going to get our customers on that. Anyone who truly needs a fire interface in production, we're going to try to get them to the latest release so they'll be able to play with this. I was actually kind of scared because I didn't know what it was at the beginning. And I had a customer ask me, and I'm like, well, I know it's in the latest version. Let me try this out. And he's like, I'm trying to connect to this fire server over here. I'm like, okay, well, and it looks like you're using this. And in less than 30 minutes, I got a query out to them to ask for everybody that was female, and the server spit back a JSON or XML, fire message, and I was able to parse it and see it. I was like, oh yeah, see, we did it. I didn't know it was that easy. Of course, there are more difficult things in terms of security and other things. This is a very open fire server, letting you, play with it and things like that. There's more complications to that, but the ability to just get it into the fire standard, grab the message that you need, put in the information you need, and get the information back the way you needed. I was really surprised that I could do it without asking for help, because the customer was watching me, we're in front, and I was like, well, I'm doing this for my first time, so I'm really sorry if it doesn't work. And it worked the first time. I was really, really surprised. So it's not impossible to do. I'm sure there will be complications in real live production cases, but it's something we can definitely make happen to all of our customers who need it.
Alex, was that a testament to your sharp intellect, to the ease of the engine, or how well thought out the fire standard was in being developed?
Oh, it's probably 90% me, and no, not at all. So Yeah, I barely knew how to spell fire, but since I knew how to spell fire, I knew where to find it in our products. And if he knew the kind of message type that he was looking for and where he wanted to connect, it happened really, really easily. So it's a testament to the product, not me.
I think one of the problems that both engines have had with Fire generally has been the fact that the Fire standard has changed so many times so quickly in the last few years. We've gone from the initial setup, and then the DSTU1 and DSTU2, and then R3 and R4, and it's been fun because you've got to a point where you've actually got something working, and then they decide to change the standard, and it's for a good reason, but because it's such a new thing and it's growing organically quite quickly, it's good that different parts of Rhapsody can be released and can pick up on and use the different versions quite easily. So that's one of the things that I've found. I was using DSTU3 and it was working absolutely fine. Things were great. And then they said, right, well, we're upgrading our server now to R4. Is that okay? And you're like, okay. Let's go back and try and work out what the issues with that are. But yeah, it's Fire is fun and Fire is crazy.
And I think one of the cool things is that there's a lot of people that it's not James and not me that are in Lineate that are attending these meetings, are a part of the standards committee, trying to figure out what to do and putting that into our product and making sure that it's easy for us. And so there's a lot of Fire expertise that we have around that is that are much smarter than me, that are thinking about these things before our customers are even asking, which is great.
Alex, I wanted to ask you, because you've been involved in some merger and acquisitions with large IDNs here in the US. Can you address what some of the unique challenges are in bringing together two different health systems that you've experienced?
Yeah, so mergers and acquisitions are always a little bit interesting because some people will have to figure out, am I being merged or am I being acquired, right? And so what will happen is when that happens, usually there are two engine teams with two different versions of two different engines. So either that or they're the same engine and we're like, okay, well, give me your export file and we'll all, be one happy family on this one server, which is pretty easy. But if it's not that way, they have a different engine, and then it's the question of somebody has to make a business and management decision of which engine gets to have all of the interfaces. That usually they are not interested in having two or three different engines unless it's really too hard to or impossible for their timeline to do. And so it is possible. I have seen some customers that have decided, you know what, you are a huge entity, we are a huge entity, we're still fairly separate, let's just keep our engines until there's a convenient time to merge this information. But most of the time during that, you need to decide whether you want one engine or another. And that's why Rhapsody and Corepoint, it's so important for us to be the easiest engine to use, the engine that you can convert from one engine into ours, and to be the easiest one to support. Because if you are all of those things, it's almost a no-brainer to say, well, why would you keep that other engine around when I use half the staff to work on my engine? I can get things fixed up in half the time. I have half as many problems as you. And so when that happens, it usually means that, okay, well, then I guess we're gonna select, it's Rhapsody and eGate, we're gonna go with Rhapsody. It's Mirth or Corepoint, we're definitely going to Corepoint, right? Whatever it is, we want to make sure that our product has the ability to be the easiest one to use, the most intuitive, the best solution possible, so that whenever these mergers happen, that we end up being the solution of choice. And as alluded to in my previous story, even if we were not the one, we were the first one they called when it did not work out with their new engine, right? And so it's great when we have amazing and strong products like Corepoint and Rhapsody to make sure that when those mergers happen, we are in the forefront of, okay, well, you need to put these things together. You need to merge two source systems. Which one, what do you want me to be a part of? Do you want us to have a professional services engagement? Do you want us to come on site? Do you want to us to work with both teams? How do you want us to do this? And we're there, and we're ready to help them out in any way possible. And the truth is, some of these guys, they do their first merger and acquisition, and they need a lot of help and handholding. And then they do their second one, and they need us just for the go live. And then by the third one, they're like, you know what, James and Alex, thank you. We got it. You taught us well. We know what to do. We know where to go from here. And so there have been many mergers and acquisitions after that we have not needed to do because of the strength of the engines.
So James, I've been asked to ask you, I know we've talked a lot about fire, but this is a different kind of fire. Can you tell us about how you've used the Rhapsody engine to literally fire up your grill?
Yeah, see, I knew this was coming. So I don't really know how it happened, but I've somehow become like an honorary Texan. I'm really into low and slow smoking. I have a hot smoker, I have a cold smoker. And obviously with smoking, a lot of people may or may not know, it's very important to get your temperatures right. So you have to make sure that your pit temperature is the right temperature, and that your meat comes up to temperature nice and slowly and hits a certain amount. Now I've got when I first started, I had some digital gauges that told me what the temperature of the pit was and what the temperature of the meat was. And I accessed it using a web front end, because it was set up a web server. And that was cool and everything, and I'd have it on my phone or my laptop, and I'd check it every so often. But yeah, the geek in me kind of wouldn't let it go, so I ended up writing some a route in Rhapsody that would poll the web front end once every minute, and it would pull the pit temperature and the meat temperature off, and it would write it to a database, and then it'd show a real-time, it's so sad, a real-time graph to show where the temperature of the pit was, and if it was going too high, if it was going too low. I get alerts through Rhapsody depending on what would happen, and then it'd tell me when the cook was finished, and I could go and take it off to rest, or take the ribs off, or carve or pull the pork. Yeah, it's a little bit sad, but I got Rhapsody, and I thought it'd be an interesting thing to try, and yeah, that's what I did, just because it's fun. Why not?
It's real. I've seen the graphs and I've seen the meat. It's real. I have not tasted the meat, and so I think we're gonna have to make sure that actually works.
Well, Alex,
anytime you're over here, you're welcome. No problem.
Alex, you mentioned that it's going to be exciting to enter new markets with our products, and I think that the first Rhapsody Smokehouse could open up somewhere in the UK, and you'll be the chef, James.
We can definitely do better than nearly every other smoking place in the UK. I've visited plenty of them, and unfortunately, it has kind of made me a bit of a snob when it comes to this kind of thing, because I don't want to be too big-headed, but there's nowhere I've been that's as good as the stuff that I do. So I'm sure, in the grand scheme of things, mine's terrible compared to some of the stuff in Texas. But yeah.
Well, we gotta have you over. Yeah. Come on over.
I definitely want to come over and. Oh yeah, I definitely want to come over and try. Yeah, definitely.
We believe in testing, and this is some testing I would really like to engage.
Definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
I try and do a bit of everything. So I do. My favorite is my favorite's changed recently. I've started using picana, which is a lot quicker cook. So it's like a Brazilian Argentinian thing, using the sirloin cap, and I can go into it a lot. I've even done that with Rhapsody. It's only an hour cook, that is, but yeah, there's lots of different things a Rhapsody can be used for. I'm excited to get into the finance side of things, insurance, but yeah, just to prove that it can do anything, I linked it up to my smoker, just because that's the way I am.
Brilliant. Well, unless you can top that story, Alex, I think we've exhausted what the products can do, and we've ended on making a perfect brisket.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I top is we never got a chance to talk about James's camper van, but we can make that as like a stinger and trailer for our next interview together. So
Yeah.
That's definitely a different type of smoking. That is different type of smoking. My drag
yes,
racing, my diesel drag
I did
racing
see that.
camper van, very different.
I did see some smoking there.
Yeah, different type of smoking.
Yeah, we'll save that for a future tale. Well, I really enjoyed listening to you guys banter about integration history with the products and your experiences in the UK and in the US. And it sounds like there's exciting opportunities for cloud native integration in the future. So I think this was a fun conversation.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.